So, confidence is definitely one of those things that is an area of interest, um, seemingly as usual, about universally. Um, and to me, it seems not unlike the sun itself, who relies on a combination of outward pressure from fusion and inward pressure from gravity. Confidence is a similar synergy of outward pressure from our own selves and the inward pressure of the world around us. The thin line, that space, that sort of friction point is where confidence either is or isn't. Um, and confidence is something that you have a chance to lose and regain over and over again through life. It's something that slips away and is recaptured over and over again. Because the overall sensation of confidence, like the overall feeling, experience of that outward pressure, is a combination of smaller areas of confidence that sort of work together as a combined sum, because there is confident walking, confident speaking, there is the confident movement of a person. Because confidence ends up being the entire activity of the whole nervous system. I mean, what is uncertainty? What is doubt itself? It is something that ends up filling that void. And it's the complete antithesis of confidence, obviously. There's confidence in swinging a hammer. And there is swinging a hammer with absolutely no confidence. That first time you're holding something with your left hand and you have a hammer in your right hand and you're looking at this situation. And the first thing that comes to mind is I could completely miss and blast my thumb, which I've done many times. And there is definitely a period of time where you do not swing with confidence. If you take that first swing with confidence, like if you give it the full support, give it a good hard swing, there's a high chance you're going to miss completely and blast your thumb. So you start with little taps, little light taps, and you kind of think to yourself, oh, okay, here we go. It gets the nail down, but it takes longer and it doesn't look good, but it gives you a little hit. No pun intended, this time an actual pun. It gives you a little hit in your nervous system, a little bit of learning, a little bit of being slightly ahead of where you were. And then you grab another nail and tap it in there real light. And you keep going and going. And if you keep doing that, you will eventually be at a point to where you can pop that nail down, give it a light tap to get it in there, and just hit it twice at full force. You can be at a point to where somebody else's hand is holding an object in place and you are hitting it with full force and full confidence, full efficiency. And there's a huge difference, obviously, between A and B there. Especially when you have somebody else's hand as a potential cost. So, just from that simple, obvious example, confidence surely has something to do with experience. And this is less true when you're a kid, because when you're a kid, you have the least experience that you can have, obviously, as a human being, but that doesn't stop you from an overt outward radiation, an outward pressure. And they say, the child's mind is like a sponge, and it is. And those two things are happening sort of simultaneously, the outward radiation and the inward pressure at the same time. And that's just the point of learning there. But it's a different type of confidence when you're young. It's more of a naive confidence. It's not a skilled confidence or a sharp confidence. It's just the activity of a energetic young person. But over time, as you get into increasingly more difficult things with a conglomeration of different people who are equally trying to sharpen their own abilities and potentially be in competition with you, like a sport, for example, that's when things really start to get sharp. And there's something else. It's quite obvious, if you think about it. You are, as I said in a previous video, a bit different when you're alone versus when there's people around. It is one circumstance, in terms of confidence, when you're by yourself, and it is the addition of other human beings that shapes and molds the contours of your state of confidence, plus the context you're actually in. What's the difference between practicing giving a speech and standing in front of 1,000 people and giving a speech? When you pretend to give a speech, do you not try to pretend that there are people there? But surely, and quite obviously, the presence of people changes your confidence. And then the actual makeup of the crowd changes your confidence again. There's a difference between a group of people who are unfamiliar with your subject, who you are teaching to, versus a crowd of experts who are all sharpened and you are lecturing your findings to. And all of these things and more are what comprise that sensation. And in the end, you're almost going to have to, at least for me, I view confidence in terms of its actual sensation as this sort of empty chamber inside that can be filled with anything. It can be filled with any of the proceedings that are going on. It can be filled with any thought. It can be animated with anything, including the exact feeling of doubt. And doubt is a tough one, because we as humans can conceive a wide number of possible interpretations. We can conceive a wide number of outcomes. And a championship basketball team, or a football team, or a championship anybody, very rarely gets to that point to where they're holding up the trophy without having a concerted effort and a feeling and an understanding that this is a championship season. Like, very rare is it the team that doesn't have it very directly in mind that they are trying to win a championship, who doesn't end up doing that. Very rarely is it a team who just sort of plays their best. Even playing your best is one thing. It's a different level of sharpness to have a specific thing in mind. And a team itself, if you think about it, what happens, what is the feeling when you approach a team and they're sort of practicing and playing, and you're observing the characters and none of them seem really that good? From that point, you're looking at the situation, and it's not a feeling of confidence. It's easy to look at that and think about your chances of victory and winning a championship and have nothing but doubt. In fact, that is the most natural, logical, rational interpretation, and reality as it plays out is most likely to follow that. But what happens when you add one really good player to that team? Like a really good player. That is, in and of itself, enough to have the door crack open and have that thing known as hope. Because before that, you are hopeless. And you know it. And you know that there is no possibility of being basked in the glory of, a championship. But if you can have one good player, suddenly there's hope. And the existence of that player increases the probability you will get another one. It's kind of hard to get that one really good player in the first place, because it comes with the understanding that you're building from the ground up from the very beginning. But it comes with that benefit of knowing that you built up from a complete no confidence team to a high confidence team, to a team that is in the running, so to speak. And you get that second really good player who complements the first player, who complements the whole team. And now the feeling is building a little bit. And you start to watch them play, and they're really good. And you start to get some confidence. And we're talking about, for the most part, all of the same people except for two on the same team who play differently as a result of the confidence of the first player and the second player. It has this sort of expanding, contagious effect, but it has to be real. You can't just sit around, talking to each other and building each other up without those two players. And in the setting of the team before, you can't just sit around talking about faking or emulating confidence. It has to be real. And that's the only way it continuously flows. Like the Chicago Bulls, that team before Jordan got there was terrible. I mean, the guys were like doing drugs and smoking and drinking, doing all kinds of crazy shit. Like they were never in contention. But Jordan shows up and it changed everything. Within 2 weeks, that team was transformed because of this guy. And he just seemingly he had a lot of outward pressure. I mean, he was the sort of person that people say had this sort of aura, this sort of thing that was contagious. And the guy was poetry in motion on the court. It was actually a beautiful thing to watch this dude play. And even that had a contagious effect. And then over time, watching him play, watching the results, watch how much better the team got, was enough to get it in the minds of the front office and the rest of the players. Like, we have an actual shot here. Like, once the hope had started to settle into the team, everybody started playing different. People started cleaning up how they were. They stopped smoking, and they were able to replace all the players over time with far more serious players. And that's how it goes. And there were several chances for Jordan to lose his confidence. And he did things to maintain his confidence. Because it has a very direct impact on how he played. Which is the most important thing. And for us out in the world, we're not playing games. We're not playing basketball, but we're living a life. And the confidence in our own selves as characters has a direct impact on how the events in life play out. And you have, in the setting of basketball, on a game-by-game basis, a chance to gain and lose confidence. And there are so many things that affect it. And Jordan didn't win a championship and didn't start seriously thinking about championship contention until that team started to build around him. Like, he had a confidence, and his confidence was strong enough to bring that team up, but he didn't have confidence in a championship until he even saw other players of a higher caliber assemble around him. And that internal chamber within us, even down to just walking, is in large part what plays out as a confident looking walk, which is kind of a silly thing to say, but it's true. Some people kind of walk around a little bit mopey, and there's a difference. It's like that chamber is just blanket filled with something outside of what's happening, something of the mind, and it takes time too, and it takes evidence. Like, you have to have actual evidence of your ability to do things, of your ability to learn, of your ability to completely fail and progressively get better. And it's a strange thing to go from no confidence to confidence. And over time, once you observe this possibility in yourself, once you observe that you are capable of learning, and not only learning, but mastering, and not only mastering, but defeating your peers who are also learning and mastering, and beating them over and over again, and actually making it look good, and actually, bringing a crowd. That sort of thing, even just from one thing, can translate into other things, and it does quite well. Jordan, he became a baseball player for a year. That sort of confidence has a way of making one think, well, I am the best ever at this, so maybe I can just play a little baseball and just, imagine that. Imagine if I tried playing baseball and just crushed it. It has that sort of bleed-off effects, and maybe, if he stuck to baseball and kept playing for years, who knows what would have happened. But that's how it is for everybody. There can be one main thing that slowly over time builds your confidence in that thing, so much so you become a bit of an artist in that area, and it bleeds into other things. It's almost like we need proof of concept or some sort of evidence that we're capable of mastering something or doing something, being good at something. And once that's known, it's a block of evidence that can translate into other things. And then once you start to get good at other things, maybe they're lesser, maybe they're not quite as time consuming or energy reliant as a sport, but you just get good at other things too over time, and it becomes this kind of mosaic of things that you're generally good at, including walking, including speaking. And you get an overarching sense of confidence. It just becomes a normal thing over time. And you're going to have several chances to, like I said, lose it and regain it, because you're going to be getting into new things quite often, relatively often, enough to where you're going to be a beginner again at some point. But there's a difference between being a beginner who's already mastered something versus just being a plain old beginner. There's a huge difference. You come into that already knowing that you're capable of mastering something, and in your mind it's only a matter of time, and it completely changes your attitude about this thing. Like, for the first half of my life until I was at least 15, I was a shy person, I was a shy kid. And I would say this day and age, shyness isn't something that you would attach to me. I mean, you could probably say that I'm more introverted, maybe 60-40 ratio, 60% introverted, 40% otherwise. But I still had confidence because of basketball. And I will always attribute basketball to my origin story, so to speak, because it was such a massive part of what I did just every day. And even when I played basketball by myself, I would pretend that there was people watching. I would pretend that there was an audience there. And it improved how I practiced. It wasn't like an intentional technique. It just made me play better. And, and it was more fun. And it's interesting too how we can kind of sense this. It's especially as you kind of get older, and confidence is something that ends up sort of striking a chord of admiration and emulation. It's kind of an indefinable characteristic that ends up being the source, or at least it piggybacks off the source and rides it out through whatever our form of outward pressure into the world is. I mean, the outward pressure of the sun is its light, and other things, but as far as we're concerned, the light. And the inward pressure is something that it's a little more subtle, a little bit more difficult, I guess, to notice. But it does keep Earth close. It does keep Earth doing what it's doing in our solar system. It is the basis of our solar system. And it's the outward pressure that seems a lot easier to notice because it is the actual animation itself. But the inward pressure is important too because it's a constant feed, in real time. And it takes a while to tune what is significant in your environment, what it is you should be noticing over other things. Because as I look around here, there's a blanket experience of inward pressure that my senses are constantly bringing in. And, even somebody's eyesight, who is noticeably worsening, will lower your confidence, obviously, because you can't see that well. And immediately one is inclined to rectify that through, glasses or something like that, or anything. It's like vision itself is such a, I guess, standard inward pressure, almost like the gravity of the sun, to where it's so ubiquitous, it's easy to forget about until it starts to go bad. But our actual interpretation of what's going on has a similar thing. And it is interesting to see what people do and don't notice, because to be the sort of person that is completely fixed on their own outward pressure, or the animation of themselves, is I don't know. I've met people like that who sort of don't really listen, who sort of mimic listening but are really just waiting to speak, and there's kind of a sense of incongruence there. It doesn't disarm you, it actually kind of arms you in a weird way. Like, it makes you, I don't want to say defensive, but it makes you out of sync in a way. And I like observing, I like listening. And over time I've become more selective, I mean, as I'm sure we all have, about who I'm listening to, And some people I like listening just by the sake of their own existence. Like they are, I like what they do, what they say, and how they are. And, that's a whole other subject. But um, you can kind of say there's a healthy radiation and a healthy absorption, a kind of in and an out, a kind of left and a right, inhale, exhale type situation. As with all things, there's always going to be that, you know, this sort of synergy of opposites. And it really does. It actually feels different because confidence isn't something that is completely sustained 100% of the time for people. There's going to be things that, like I said, are kind of a blow. Because things will come up and people will say things and the world will do things that are not perfectly in line with your worldview. And the way things have gone in your life, the way you've done things, end up slowly molding this overall picture of the world. And for the most part, things tend to fit that. But continuously over time, things will come to pass that are directly in opposition to that. And that's kind of one of those moments, like, and let's say that it's a true thing, that it's not a thing that you can just rationalize or cover up or fit into your worldview at all. It requires of you a change. And we're kind of in a time now, too, where the evidence of one's worldview is publicly shown and publicly available because we post it on the internet. Well, what happens when things come to pass that are contradictory to what you've established intellectually? Are you going to try to do intellectual gymnastics to support your previous findings? Do you pride yourself on your ability to keep falsehoods alive because of your ability to perform mental gymnastics sufficient to persuade people that you're still right? That's the question, isn't it? And I see that a lot too, people who end up being wrong. Let's face it. And it happens every day. And you kind of have this moment. What are they going to do? And I'm almost disappointed. I'm disappointed when I see people just try to do something that is completely akin to mental gymnastics to keep their previous worldview alive. But how are you going to live that way, dude? How are you going to do that? How are you going to make these little incongruencies and asymmetries part of you? That's gonna hit your confidence, and it's gonna change it in a way that I don't think you're gonna like the way that feels, because and that is enough. It's much better to shift and incorporate, especially when we start to get older. You know what I mean? And we live in this age of information, where you can learn anything. There's a lot of information out there about a lot of different things. And to be a confident intellectual, let's say, being an intellectual, a public intellectual, involves a lot of opinion sharing. And, that's the sort of game where it's like, for me personally, before I say something, I have to be sure of it, because nobody likes that feeling of having to have their worldview change publicly. But the only reason that I can say what I'm saying in a way that even sounds confident or feels confident is because of the age of information. Because we have the ability to learn whatever the hell we want, whenever we want to. And, yeah, it's one of those things that's, I guess, somewhat entertaining because it has a way of changing how you can think about somebody, you know. And for a person in a situation, it's almost like this chamber within. It's always trying to have things seep into it, and it's like this chamber is a mix of things too. You know, it's like a mix of gases in a way that comprise one overall thing. It's like doubt is constantly trying to get in there because of the fact that we are aware of so many different potential outcomes. Like, and we don't want to get hurt, you know? It's like, no matter how many times we've done something, like I've swung a hammer thousands of times and I still hit my thumb, you know? I've used a grinder thousands of times, but I still cut my hand every once in a while. And when you've done something for so long, over and over again, and you still make mistakes, that doesn't really shake your confidence because you can kind of chalk that up to something else. Like, it doesn't give you doubt. The only way it would give you doubt is if you kept doing it. You know, if you were an expert and every time you swung a hammer, you hit your thumb or your pointer finger or some part of your hand, then it might be time to say, all right, what's the deal here? You know, I was fine yesterday. But if you do it once a year, you know, you can kind of chalk that up to something outside of your own expertise, and it doesn't become a vehicle for doubt, you know. It's like being a basketball player, and, you know, you don't expect yourself to make every shot, even though it's theoretically possible. You don't expect yourself to win every game, even though you know that it's theoretically possible. So, losing a game or missing a shot isn't enough to let doubt find its way in and expand into this chamber and take over everything else and change your total disposition. But if you missed every shot in a game, or you lost 3/4 of your games, then you might need to revise something and start to let doubt actually creep in and do its thing, because then doubt is legitimately warranted. And it's kind of this ratio, you know. And at the end of a season in sports, we have our record for that season. And we have footage, and we have literally everything that we could possibly analyze to improve the situation. So, and that's kind of a unique circumstance, especially, you know, in human life. It's like we don't have a file or log for everything that we do all the time like we do in sports. So it's kind of a different way of analyzing things. But you can be sure of that much. If you are an expert and, you know, you walk so well that it looks good and it looks confident and people look at you walking and it's kind of like a strut that you have, and people are like, man, you know, who's that dude? I like the way he walks. If you from time to time stub your toe or trip a little, you know, that's not going to be enough for you to begin to doubt yourself. But that's how it is. It is this sort of internal ratio. And it's a synergy of what is currently going on. Whatever you get into as a person in the present has to be the main thing that fills this internal chamber. If you're swimming, it has to be swimming. in order to feel the maximum synergy of the inward and outward pressure that is you and the swimming pool. You have to be in what they call this sort of flow state. If you are anywhere else, if there is anything else in that chamber, it should be little bits of information, knowledge, things that you've taken that encourage you. That should be the thing that comprises this chamber. Mostly swimming, but shreds of other psychological and emotional and bits of information that aid the act of swimming. Not doubt, not the possibility that you could lose. That shouldn't be there, because of course that's almost completely redundant information, because of course it's possible you could lose, and it doesn't do you any good to have that within this internal chamber while you're swimming. And that is the struggle of athletes. And that is equally the struggle of people. That's what's happening essentially constantly, because while you're doing your thing, whatever it is, there's going to be these kind of little blips, these little moments that kind of trip you up a little bit. And in those moments, it's almost like there's a plug. And those moments flick the plug a little and give doubt and all these other hypothetical things a chance to get in there. And you quickly have to move on. And if you let that plug go, that I've seen this for people, a simple tiny little mistake is enough sometimes for people to not be able to recover and plug this thing back up, plug that chamber up, before a cascade of doubt-laced thoughts and feelings and sensations begin to fill up this chamber, and it completely makes them quit right there. That happens all the time. And not even in sports, I mean just with things in general, especially when you're on your way to becoming at a point where you can hold confidence within for sustained periods of time. Especially, when you're maybe 40% in, or halfway, or even 60. It's in those times, on the voyage to mastery, that you're at the highest chance of slipping up in some way or making up some kind of mistake that ends up being enough to make you quit. That ends up being enough to hit that plug out and make all of those things that have been in your mind for all this time make their way in. Maybe those things are true. This is the verifiable evidence. This moment that happened is enough to verify the peripheral things that have been going on this entire time, even things that people have said. Because for some people, there are, as features of the external pressure from the world, other people saying things. And who knows their motive? Who knows who they're backing? Who knows whose corner they're in? Who knows their motivation? But whatever it is, they are saying things that are attempts to hit that plug, so to speak. And that's ongoing with everything all the time. That's the nature of us in a world, in a society, doing what we do. Even for the best of us. Even for people who have accomplished just absolutely remarkable feats. I mean, true masters. That internal chamber is constantly under siege. It constantly has, if you view that chamber as something that can be filled by whatever is currently happening, plus whatever little psychological, emotional tips and tricks you can use to aid that full chamber. If you can view that chamber as being surrounded by all other potentials, all other potential thoughts, all other potential opinions and different things that constantly want to get into that chamber. It's almost like the walls on that chamber are gilded, and they are completely impenetrable. But there are little spots that have to exist for things to come and go. So there are these little openings, and you have to let in those openings what you need to let in and then close it up. And if you can't do that, then you might let in there what you need to let in plus some other things. And you will not end up with that feeling of confidence, which is required for you to do your best. And like I said, especially on the voyage to mastery, it's one thing once you're a master, once you're a fucking grandmaster, and you got fighters and boxers, the Muhammad Ali's of the world, the Mike Tysons, and even the UFC these days. These dudes spend all their time training, and they are the best in the world at what they do. And there are people constantly telling them things. And eventually it reaches a point to where they have to enter the ring and start fighting each other, which is the whole purpose of everything they've been doing. Plus, I guess you could say, they actually enjoy this lifestyle of doing this, which I understand. But in the end, it's in that ring, and somebody's gonna lose. And before you enter the ring, your worldview is one thing. And when you leave, now, you have a chance to lose or gain confidence. There's now a chance for something to change. And what are you going to tell yourself if you lose? Because the other guy won, and he doesn't have to tell himself anything. He won. He can go on training, and maybe he'll never lose. Maybe he'll be undefeated. And believe me, that dude's going to have a different kind of confidence if he's undefeated. But what are you going to do when you're leaving? Are you going to say you didn't train hard enough? Are you, as they say, giving excuses? This is the entire plight of people all the time. And, sometimes I wish certain things. I wish you could, look at somebody and see their metaphorical internal chamber and see what was in there. And everything leading up to that fight, I mean, these guys are trying to intimidate each other. They're trying to look at each other. They're trying to say things to get inside his head. They're trying to say things that hit that plug, just pop it. Just long enough to let something in there that helps them win. They're trying to say things that help them out and hurt the other guy, obviously. But that's what's happening there. And basketball players, they talk shit on the court. There's all these little things that we kind of do to try to hit that plug, And in the end, it's the actual performance. It's the actual event, what happens itself, that is, the true speaker, let's say. There's only one thing that is etched into time. And what we're seeing is not just the combined sum of all your efforts. There is that as one component. But as another component is the makeup of that internal chamber while you're fighting. Because you're either going to be able to blame one of two things. Either you didn't train hard enough, or your mind was not in the right place during the fight. It's either going to be one of those two things. Because the reason isn't always that the other guy trained harder and that he's better. It's that his mind was in the right place to enable him to be and act in a way that was simply better. And it is that feeling of confidence. It's a full nervous system activation. It's full outward pressure as well as inward pressure, like I said. And even a fight is a good example of that, because it's exactly the outward pressure of one man and the inward pressure of another. It's a constant back and forth between landing hits and dodging hits, of anticipation and your will. And it's in real time. It's quick, you know. So in order to, I mean, you could be somebody who train less, and this happens. Somebody who actually trains less, and still win. You know, just because of how your mind is. And really, that is the plight, the ultimate plight of humanity at all times, for all things. So, within that, it is absolutely possible to be confident, have that feeling pretty much all the time. But it's also possible to always let in just enough to where you don't feel that way.